What is the most absurd you're too old to not know how to do that thing that you've seen? My mom can't remember whether blue or red is associated with hot or cold. When she's in the car and wants to turn on the AC, she just randomly sets the dial to one side or the other and waits for the air to come on to see whether she's right or not. When I was little I saw an interview on PBS with an astronomer, and he said he got the blue and red faucets mixed up because red stars are the coldest and blue stars are the hottest. I've met more than one person who doesn't get fire alarms. When my husband and I first got an apartment together, we were cooking and we burned something. The smoke caused the smoke alarm to start beeping. Instead of opening the window to let the smoke out, like a normal person, he calmly walked to the door and began putting on his shoes to go outside and wait for the fire department to come, because he thought that when the smoke alarm goes off, that's what you do. After all, why else would we have gone through all those fire drills in elementary school? In a dorm this is also what you do, at 2 AM, multiple times a week. Bastards. My grandmother is 88 years old, drives a Ford Mustang, does not know how to put gas in her car, has literally driven cars for 70 years without ever once using a gas pump. She calls me every few weeks to go over there and follow her to the gas station, so I can pump for her. I don't have the heart to tell her that the employees will do it if she asks nicely, since it's one of the few occasions where I see her. Your nice grandson. Oh, I am all over this one. I had an old roommate boyfriend who was very sheltered when it came to basic life stuff. Here are some highlights. 1. Laundry. Had never done it, ever. When he moved in, all his clothes were filthy because his parents hadn't visited in 6 months or so, and so nothing had been washed since then. Had to show him how a washer dryer worked. 2. Cooking. Could only use a microwave. Making ramen on a stove was a mystery. More than once I saw him crunching his way through a half-cooked packet because he didn't get the water past warm. 3. Bananas. This is my absolute favorite. I came home with fruit. Parents also not good with encouraging a healthy diet, and handed him one. He bit into the skin, looked confused, saw me looking at him oddly. I had to show a 21-year-old man how to open a banana. He had eaten them many times before, and had never been shown asked to peel his own. TLDR. American adult male had never peeled a banana. My college roommate asked me how to make a sandwich. Like how to actually put mayonnaise on the bread and slice a tomato. He was 22 and had recently been accepted to medical school. God help us. My girlfriend in college didn't know how to boil water. I explained how easy it was. Water goes into pot. Pot goes on stove. Turn on the stove. And she did it. Then left the pot there for 4 hours waiting for the water to finish boiling. Of course all of the water evaporated. She completely burned the crap out of the pot, and then started to panic and cry because she didn't know how to turn the stove off. I am no longer with this girl. Whoa. This is a little different than some of the comments on here, but my dad's college roommate was in town a few weeks back, so my dad and I went to meet him, grab a beer, and shoot the crap. While we were hanging out, they did a little reminiscing, and they mentioned the roommate's girlfriend from freshman year. Apparently this girl had watched a few too many musicals and actually genuinely thought that people in relationships would actually sing to each other. They went on one date and it was fine. The second date was okay, but the girl seemed a bit distant at the end. He went on the third date, and she asked, "Why don't you ever sing to me?" His response was somewhere along the lines of, "Why the frick would I be singing?" She complained that if he really liked her, he would sing to her, or at least try. There didn't have to be any dancing, just singing. He thought she was joking, so he made a smartass comment about how stupid that was. She didn't appreciate it. My dad and his roommate were convinced that she was joking and screwing with him. The roommate even went over to her room, and girl's roommate wouldn't let him in to see her because she was so heartbroken. A few weeks later, the girl's roommate apologized because she didn't realize how crazy the reason for the breakup had been. TLDR. Why the frick would a guy just break into song? A great example of how movies, music, pop culture in general create unrealistic expectations for relationships. Also, hilarious. In high school, there was one time I was going to give a friend a ride home after a band practice or something since somebody hadn't come to pick him up and he said it was going to be a long while. He told me which direction to start in, but as we continued driving it became clear that he actually didn't know where he lived. He didn't know the address, or how to get there from the school he goes to every weekday. He tried giving terrible directions like it's near the flashing yellow lights. During the drive, I couldn't believe that this high school sophomore actually had no idea where he lived. I had to end up just taking him back to the school so his mom could pick him up. Not sure it fits, but several years ago I tried to play clit in a game of Scrabble. Classy, I know, and a 23-year-old girl asked what's that? She had been raised pretty conservatively. Not my story, but my sister's. She was a residential advisor for first years in college. She smelled smoke in the common room and found that a girl had put a bowl with foil in the microwave and it was on fire. She put the fire out. The girl came out and said it was her food and she thought foil would make it heat faster in the microwave. Well, technically. Met a woman in a parking garage that didn't know that her key could unlock the door. She flagged me down to ask if I could give her a ride to get a battery for the key fob that unlocked the door so she could get into her car. Oof. I only just got a car that had keyless entry a year and a half ago. Up until that point, I definitely was accustomed to sticking the key in the lock and turning it. I still get to do that with my apartment door, so fortunately my skills at unlocking things with keys have not diminished. I dated a guy. He was 19. That did not know how to use a steak knife. Instead of sawing the meat, he attempted to force the knife through it by simply pushing down. I don't know if you don't know this, dude, but steak is not quite the same consistency as softened butter. He kept shaking the entire table. We were in a restaurant as he tried to force the knife into the meat. Eventually I stopped him, took his knife, and showed him how to saw the meat. His mind was completely blown. When I asked him how the frick it was possible that he didn't know how to do this, he told me, oh, my parents usually just let me pick up the meat in my hands at home. We broke up a couple months later. We broke up later that night. FTFY. In all seriousness though, I am so sorry. My roommate of 3 months now has astounded me with the inane things she doesn't seem to grasp. For example, she saw me making a cheeseburger and promptly exclaimed that's how you melt cheese on it or something to that effect. She put a lid on something in the microwave and the handle started to smoke and melt because she didn't think that there might be a screw holding the thing together. She follows directions on mostly cooked food, i.e., ready rice, frozen veggies etc., to the letter and then doesn't understand that there may be any number of discrepancies between our appliance and the instructions. Complains her food never cooks, and eats it anyway. Also she cannot seem to wrap her head around turning her light off when she goes to sleep and not running up the power bill. Taking a half-hour-long shower in the morning while 3 other people are getting ready for the day and insisting that her word is infallible. She's a child. I would like to get her to move out and this is the first place I've been able to vent about it. Happy first post to me. How to wash your face. I think most people dating back to early humans have figured out the cup your hands under running water, lean your head over the sink and bring your hands up to your face process. I lived with an adult girl who did not know to do this. She would just want the freaking water up at her face and get the sink, the counter, the mirror, the toilet, freaking everything soaking wet. That's how they do it in commercials. A friend of a friend is a 20-year-old girl who doesn't know how and refuses to pump her own gas. She also refuses to be taught. She practically refuses to drive herself anywhere. For example, she lives now in a city about 2-3 hours away and will only ride with someone else. When traveling to a closer city roughly an hour away does the same thing. To the point she missed seeing her current love interest because there was nobody to drive her. I grew up in a country where it's illegal to pump your own gas, so I had to learn how when I was almost 30. I'm a senior in college and I still find myself shaking my head when my classmates don't know how to use the campus bus routes to get back home. They're afraid they'll get lost and end up at rock bottom or some crap. A friend of mine tried to cook rice in the kettle because she understood it involved heat and water. That was her logical conclusion. She's 27. My brother is 16. He can't ride a bike or tie shoelaces or make food more complicated than switching on an oven or kettle. I'm concerned about not being able to tie his shoelaces. My girlfriend went 15,000 miles without getting an oil change. She thought you only bring it in when there is a problem. My aunt went 30,000 with no oil change, then got mad when the dealership refused to give her a new engine because of it. I haven't truly parallel parked since the day I passed my driver's test. I avoid it like the plague. I'll even stop the car and make my friend's Chinese fire drill so someone else can park it for me. I understand the mechanics of how to do it, but I'm blind in one eye and it affects my depth perception enough to make me uncomfortable doing it. By refusing to learn, I promise I'm just looking out for the well-being of all of your vehicles. At first I was going to scold you, then came the blindness. I'm pretty sure no depth perception is a reasonable excuse. I was a class acquaintance of a pretty popular girl in my grade, so one day sitting at the popular table, kind of a big deal for me as a nerdy guy with this girl, I learned that she didn't know how to use a knife and cut up her lunch and her lackey friend kind of did it for her as her mom did when she was home. The frick. We were like 14. My current roommate has no idea how to shop, fill groceries, manage the food he has already bought. Now, we live about a 3-minute walk from a pretty large grocery store, so food shopping is by no means inconvenient. His food is constantly rotting in the fridge. When he orders out, he leaves the leftovers in the fridge until they have to be thrown away. He currently has 3 half-eaten bags of chips, same brand style. He probably ends up throwing away $100 worth of food every month. Giving tip. My friends are sweet and do tip, but figuring out 10% or 20% is like rocket science to them. Move the decimal over. Boom. 10%. Need 20%? Double that crap. The deep magic is 15%. Move the decimal. Divide by 2. Add to the moved decimal figure. If you forgot what that was, it's on the receipt. And the true secret, it doesn't need to be exact. Spooky voice. My car's battery was getting old and had started to die when I would park it to go to class. I come out of class one day and try to start my car and, of course, it won't start. I'm cussing at it a bit and decide to wait until the person parked next to me shows up. It doesn't take long and this girl, fairly attractive, shows up and locks the new Lexus SUV right next to me. I politely ask her if she can give me a jump. She agrees, as long as it doesn't hurt her car, and asks what she needs to do. I tell her all I need to do is for her to pop her hood for now and then start it when I say to. She looks at me for a second and then says, how do I pop the hood? I don't judge. New car for her probably, and she hasn't experimented to figure it out. I open her hood for her, showing her exactly how I do it so she knows, and then hook up my jumper cables, also explaining what I'm doing. I then tell her to start her car and she does. My car starts up fine. I tell her that is all there is and she can close her hood when she responds with, how do I do that? Out of all the car related things here, I think this one is probably the most common one. You'll be surprised at how many people don't know how to jump start a car. They sometimes don't even know where the battery is located. On newer cars I know it can be in some odd places, but when they just kind of look blankly it is depressing. A 21-year-old woman at work has 2 kids by 2 different men and her grandmother adopted them. Said woman found out this week she is pregnant with her 3rd kid from another guy. I think 21 is old enough to know you've made 2 kids someone else is raising. It's time to stop. Perhaps she doesn't know how one gets pregnant. You should probably give her a pamphlet explaining how reproduction works. The more you know, and all that. I was on a backpacking trip with my 15-year-old brother and my dad this summer and we had just finished dinner. My dad had gone down to the lake to fish, but since I'm a PI decided to make some instant cheesecake instead. My brother followed suit. I looked at the instructions which say something 1. Add water. 2. Beat for 2 minutes. 3. Enjoy, so I added the water and started beating the mix, as in stirring it vigorously with a spoon. I looked over and saw my little brother holding his bag with one hand and just repeatedly punching it with the other. Instant dessert flying everywhere. We had a little chat. That day he learned that violence was not always the answer. That's amazing. I respect your brother's commitment. I was asking my chemistry teacher about something in high school. Junior year, a few years back, and a girl was behind me with her student notebook out. I knew she probably wanted to go to the bathroom, so I told her to go ahead, and she gave her notebook to the teacher to sign her a help us, but he handed it back because it was blank and asked her to write the date and time. She turned around and stared at the clock, analog, for about 10 seconds and said, "I can't tell time." I learned lefty loosey, righty tighty from Barney's father in How I Met Your Mother. This feels like something I should have been taught as a kid. I learned that from Scrubs. This is my first post ever, but my story is too ridiculous not to share. So, my husband and I were living with his parents for a while after he lost his job, and his 30-year-old sister was also living there while she finished nursing school and whatnot. She was an abhorrently messy person, and I had the pleasure of sharing a bathroom with her. Now, she had always had an extremely heavy period, so that time of the month was a literal bloody mess everywhere. One morning I wake up for work, sleepy-eyed, grumpy, walk to the bathroom and sit down on the toilet. As I am sitting there, I notice drops of blood all over the bathroom floor. Then I glance over to the wastebasket and notice it is overflowing with unwrapped, bloody, disgusting pads, and they are spilling out everywhere. I am so angry because I have yelled at her for this once before. I get up to grab the Clorox wipes, and then I see I have also sat in blood she left on the toilet. Mind you, I am very sleepy and hardly had the time to come to my senses yet. I shriek, and then I see that I have also stepped in it as well, because there were drops of blood on the bathmat that I didn't see, and I tracked it all over the fricking house. I started screaming at her from the bathroom to come clean up the fricking murder scene and to take more care of the way she leaves the bathroom, and you know what she says? "I don't need you telling me what to do." Excuse me, you are 30 fricking years old. I can't believe I have to tell you that this in the first place. You have had your period for 15 or so years and you still don't know how to wrap up a pad or wipe down a toilet. And you're going to be a nurse? Are you kidding me? How to dress. Surprised by how many fellow college students show up to interviews and career fairs dressed like they're going out on a Friday night and wonder how come they didn't get called back. Don't even get me started there. As a relatively sharp dressed man, I do what I can on a budget of roughly zero. It pisses me off to no end to see a-holes at the career fair in shorts and a Packers jersey. Number. Go home. Get the frick out of here. I have one friend who is ridiculous with this kind of thing. He's 28, and the most notable thing I remember is that he was planning to buy a bouquet of tulips for a girl a week before his date, because he thought they didn't die. His reasoning was that they stay alive all summer in the ground. I still tie my girlfriend's shoelaces for her. She's picked it up now, almost, but she was never taught as a kid because her parents were never around. See, my parents never being around was the reason I got so annoyingly independent. Also Matilda, I was always mad that by 6 I couldn't make pancakes from scratch like she could. I had my 20-year-old roommate ask me how to make noodles. I said boil water and he was still confused. In his defense, he is the dumbest kid I have ever met. In his defense, he is the dumbest kid I have ever met. I am using this. Okay, that is not at all correct, but in your defense, you are a complete freaking idiot. Same friend, mid-20s. Doesn't know how to iron clothes and would ask me to iron her clothes before we went out but refused to let me teach her how. Eventually had to stop doing that for her. Would make her dad drive her car to the gas station and fill it up for her every time she got under half a tank. Refused to drive more than 20 minutes for a social gathering. If we were going to a party, dinner, whatever more than 20 minutes from her, someone had to pick her up and drive her no matter how out of the way for them. Didn't know how to pay rent, utility bills, health bills, etc. Basically her go-to reaction to anything was to call her mom or dad and make them deal with things for her. Needless to say, I am no longer friends with this person. I have never lived in a house that I have not also worked out how to break into. Since I was 5, and my mum got me to climb up on a wheelie bin to crawl into the second floor bathroom window so as to unlock the back door for her and her friends. My nearing 40 ex-boyfriend didn't know how to break up with me, so he just stopped talking to me and let me figure it out on my own. I know that feel. Internet hugs. A friend of mine in high school came to the deli where I worked and ordered a pound of peel and eat shrimp. He didn't get the peel part and ate a whole pound of shrimp with the shells and legs on. You are 70 years old. I refuse to believe that you do not yet understand the concept of promptly paying for your purchases. That has been the name of the game for over 20 years now. Sitting in library. 16-year-old asks librarian what the time is. Librarian points to clock. Girl says she cannot read analog clocks. I lift book I'm reading higher to hide shocked face. Had to teach a 20-year-old girlfriend how to grate cheese. She said her mom just put it in the blender. It made me sad to think about all of those taco nights without properly grated cheese. My 23-year-old brother and I bought one of those big jugs of iced tea powder and he asked me, "So, do you just dump the whole thing in and add the water?" I said yes. Priceless. My wife and I got married when I was 18 and she was 17. She grew up very sheltered in a wealthy family. She never had a license or a job. After we got married I made her get her license. One day while I was at work she decided to go see a friend and called me crying saying the car was making a funny dinging sound and a light was on. I had her send me a picture and it was the fuel light. No big deal. I told her to go fill up the tank. She says okay and I think the problem is solved. Less than 10 minutes later I get a phone call. Turns out she didn't know how to pump gas or even how to pay for it. Tried to coach her through it over the phone but she didn't understand. Luckily, a nice old lady was there to help her. TLDR. Wife didn't know how to pump gas. My boyfriend cannot understand anything but the exact time in exact numbers. If you say 4:15 he has no idea what you're talking about. Also, refuses to learn. My sister, in her late 30s, only recently discovered that the wand at the car wash sprays a lot harder if you pull the trigger. You own a decent car. It's a several $1,000 investment at minimum. Maybe you should care enough to learn the simplest maintenance items, check and maintain the fluids and filters, know how to check and change light and fuses, maybe even spring for a pocket notebook and keep a maintenance log in the glove compartment so you can tell a mechanic, "No, I changed the air filter a month ago." It's fine when he tries to upsell you needlessly. These things take, collectively, not even 2 hours to learn from a decent automotive manual available at most good libraries and will save you hundreds if not thousands of dollars. This is more sad than funny. I worked retail for years. As a store manager, I felt it was best for me to work with everyone their first day to ensure they got to feel comfortable with me and could trust me with issues they may have. I was closing with a teen girl and was explaining to her that she needs to sweep out the cash register area after all the paperwork was done. I told her where the broom was and began to count down the drawer. After that I wandered off to do other things. I came back after 10 minutes to see her holding the broom with both arms locked straight out and kind of dragging it in long lines away from the cash register. Visually, it looked like she was holding a heavy floor lamp and was dragging it from one corner to another. I went over and asked if she was doing okay and she smiled and said, "Well, I've never really used one of these things before, but I think I can do it." She had never, in her life, used a broom before, and somehow never had seen someone use one before. I showed her how to actually sweep by telling her there were some shortcuts she could take and demonstrating them. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.